My Very Own Fairy Stories by Johnny Gruelle. Section 3 of My Very Own Fairy Stories, The Ugly Caterpillar. One day, a little fuzzy caterpillar went out for a walk in the garden. Under her arm she carried a little spinning wheel on which her mother had taught her to spin those pretty silk things you sometimes see hanging on trees, called cocoons. You would think that this little caterpillar would be very happy, because she had such a nice spinning wheel and knew how to make such pretty things with it. But no, she was not happy today because she was short and fat and fuzzy, and people made fun of her looks wherever she went. It is often that way, for people who can do the prettiest things are not always the prettiest to look at. As she crawled along in the garden, she saw a tall sunflower, and she thought it would be nice to crawl up to the top of that sunflower and sit in the warm sun all day without having to move around to keep out of the shadow. For she was a wise little caterpillar, and she knew that sunflowers always follow the sun, and that all she would have to do would be to sit up on the sunflower, and it would turn her around and keep her in the sunlight all day long. So she tucked her little spinning wheel under her arm and started to crawl up the stalk. But because she was so fat and fuzzy, she waddled from side to side, and she humped her back in such a ridiculous way that all the other people who lived in the garden, such as the birds and the worms and the bugs, burst out laughing at her. There were a number of katydids sitting upon the leaf of the sunflower quarreling amongst themselves. And when they saw the caterpillar climbing up the stalk in such a ridiculous way, they all cried out, "Well, will you look at the ugly caterpillar?" The caterpillar heard it, and she blushed with shame, because although she knew she was ugly, she did not like to hear people say so. She stopped halfway up the stalk, while the katydids flew around her and made fun of her. "My, what an ugly thing you are, and look at the way you crawl along. Why don't you fly around as we do?" "And why haven't you pretty wings like we have?" said one. "And why can't you sing like we can?" said another. "Aren't you ashamed of yourself to be so fuzzy and ugly and useless?" said a third. Great big tears dropped on the caterpillar's cheek, and she turned and sadly climbed down the stalk again. "I will try another stalk where there are no katydids," she said. But the katydids saw her going up the other stalk, and they flew over to it and said, "Get away, you ugly thing! What do you mean by coming around here trying to associate with us beautiful creatures?" They jeered and they sneered at the poor little caterpillar, who sorrowfully turned around and slowly climbed down the stalk. "Oh, why wasn't I made beautiful like the katydids?" she said to herself. "Why haven't I got a beautiful voice and beautiful wings so I can fly instead of dragging myself along the ground and humping my back so that everybody laughs at me and calls me ugly?" While she was saying this, she crawled along the garden till she came to a large tree. "I hope there are no katydids in this tree," and she took a firm hold on her little spinning wheel and started up the trunk. "I am going to climb up to the top of this tree and spin a nice little house and bed for myself." She started climbing. It was a long, hard climb, but finally she got to a great big limb, and under one of the largest leaves she set up her spinning wheel and spun for herself a cocoon house made of the softest silk, and inside of it she made a warm little bed with silken covers. When all was finished, the ugly fuzzy caterpillar went inside and spun a silk door over the opening so that the katydids couldn't come in and poke fun at her. Then the ugly little caterpillar took off her shoes and stockings and curled up in her little silken bed, and in a little while she fell asleep. She slept for months and months. The sun traveled farther to the south each day, and the cold winds swayed the branches of the tree and rocked the caterpillar into a deeper sleep. When Jack Frost came, he coated the little silken house with sparkling frost, and nipped the heels of the katydids so that their voices were very hoarse. and they were compelled to seek shelter in chinks of logs where Jack Frost could not find them. When the winter had passed and spring with her warm sunshine and rumbling showers had opened the buds of the tree and called forth the tiny flowers, the caterpillar still slept, and as the days grew warmer and the birds sang sweeter, she had a wonderful dream. She dreamed that a tiny fairy came and woke her with a touch of her golden wand. The fairy was all white and beautiful, and the ugly little caterpillar was dazzled. "What do you wish for most?" said the good fairy, and the ugly little caterpillar, thinking of the way everybody jeered and sneered at her and made fun of her ridiculous walk, said, "I should like to be a beautiful creature with wonderful wings like the rainbow, so I could fly everywhere and people would cry out, 'Oh, look at the beautiful caterpillar!'" And the fairy smiled and said, "Very well, you shall have your wish," and she seemed to fade away. The caterpillar awoke, rubbed her eyes, and looked all around her. "Dear me," she said to herself, "it was only a dream, but what a beautiful dream it was." And she rose and went to the door, and strangely enough, it was open, as if a really truly fairy had been in and forgot to shut the door on her way out. The caterpillar went out on the leaf, and the katydids were sitting there quarreling just as before, but as soon as they saw her, they became silent. "Now they will begin to make fun of me," said the caterpillar, but how surprised she was when the katydids bowed to her and whispered to themselves so loud that the caterpillar could hear, "Oh, what a beautiful creature!" The caterpillar looked around to see whom they meant. "They surely can't mean me," said the caterpillar, "for no one was ever so ugly as I am." But when she turned her head, she was surprised to find that while she slept, she had grown 2 wonderful wings, beautiful as rainbows, and that she was an ugly caterpillar no longer, but a beautiful butterfly. Her dream had come true. "Isn't she beautiful?" said the katydids. And the beautiful butterfly, which was once an ugly caterpillar, lifted her head proudly and waved her wings. And lo, when she waved her wings, she rose and flew out into the air. "I can fly! I can fly!" cried the butterfly. "I will never have to crawl around on the ground and hump my back in the ridiculous way I did when I was an ugly caterpillar." The katydids saw her flying gloriously around, and they all cried out, "Oh, let us make her our queen!" And they came and knelt down before her on the limb of the tree where the butterfly now sat, waving her glorious wings. "You are beautiful!" cried the katydids. "Be our queen!" End of section 3.